2023. May I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and that this recording will be archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up if they can be seen or on screen, or use the raise hand function? If a participant raises their hand via the function and is not subsequently invited to speak by the chair, please could they turn their camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. When invited to address by the chair, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the attention of the chair and or Democratic Services Officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and or to grab the attention of the chair or Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard or seen when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the chair or Democratic officer know. Okay, on to agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any?
Chair, I've only had one through. That's from Mrs. Smith, one of our tenant representatives. I don't know if committee have any others.
Okay. I'm guessing there are no other apologies as nobody's put their hand up or looking to speak. Okay. Agenda item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of July 2023. Are we happy to take these minutes in one go? Yeah, as they are? Okay, thank you.
Chair.
Thank you. Item number 3 is to receive declarations of interest and the nature of such interests. Do we have any? Okay. Item number 4 is the Financial Strategy 2024 to 25. This went to Cabinet in July, 20th of July 2023. And was that Gemma going to take this one?
Yes, please,
Yes,
Chair. Good
thank you.
evening. Thank you. I've just got some slides to take us through the financial strategy report. It's very much a scene setting report that kind of kicks off the budget strategy process for this round, setting it for 24-25 and over the medium term financial plan. There's obviously a lot of work still to be done in terms of revising cost pressures and looking at closing any funding gap that we think will be identified. So I'll just share the slides now.
Okay. That's come up, Gemma.
Lovely, thank you. So this slideshow just covers some of the main components of the financial strategy report. So in terms of the approach to the budget this year, I think we're intending to adopt an approach which was broadly similar to 23-24, and this slide just outlines the principles that we would be following in terms of delivering the corporate plan, focusing on supporting the most vulnerable, and it's really important that any budget strategy that we implement is sustainable. And there are various levers that we can look at in terms of developing that strategy. And this also picks up the really important point about collective responsibility for developing that budget and making sure that we're delivering best value. So in terms of the economic outlook, as you'll all be aware, it continues to be a challenging situation for our communities and for our employees, and also as a council delivering services as well. So inflation continues to be high, although we have seen a recent reduction, and also the base rate for the Bank of England continues to be high as well. So in terms of the funding position that we're currently projecting in terms of our rolled forward report, we are projecting some increase in government grant, although we haven't got a lot of clarity going forward in terms of what that funding looks like. We're also projecting an increase in council tax. We have used some smoothing reserves throughout that period, and we will be looking to continue that use. Cost pressures are set out and they're categorised in the way that we did for 23-24. So there are investment cost pressures, there are demographic cost pressures, and those are largely linked to social services and education. Obviously, the significant sum for us is inflation cost pressures, and that includes currently some about 3.5 million for pay awards, although I expect that will need to be revised up as we go into the budget process. There's a smaller sum for capital financing, and then there's also other pressures. And we know from a specific point of view with this committee, there are specific cost pressures around homelessness as the kind of fallout of Welsh Government grant takes place, and the need to address that gap then in kind of homelessness provision whilst the proposals in the wrapping housing strategy take place to increase the capacity. So in 24-25, we're looking at a funding gap as a starting point of 6.4 million. As I say, we're currently in a process of asking directorates to review those cost pressures, and I know that, you know, from a pay point of view, we're expecting those cost pressures to increase. So it's likely initially that that funding gap will increase as we go through that process. Just moving on to the next slide. So in terms of addressing that approach, obviously we need to look at all our funding sources, and we need to really challenge those cost pressures and to make sure that they're really sound, they're definitely required, they align with the council's corporate priorities. And also it's likely, given that funding gap, that we'll need to also look at potential savings, but also we're really keen to look at schemes in the transformation space as well. So that's part of the reason for wanting to start this budget process as early as possible, so we can give people time and space to identify potential transformation themes. So in terms of the kind of the savings framework in the traditional sense, and I think in the report it's called the tactical savings framework, we're talking about things like demand management, generating income, looking at the digital strategy and corporate asset management, workforce and procurement. But then in terms of transformation, it's around looking at service transformation, whether we can identify any digital innovation, looking at economic growth. And we obviously do have reserves that have been specifically identified to support investment and risk and reshaping as well, that can be utilised as part of any invest to save proposals. So those were the main points I was going to draw out on the report, but I am happy to take any questions.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? I don't see anybody with a hand up. Thank you, Gemma. Are we happy to move? Are we happy? This is a reference, so I'm assuming it's just for noting. Are we happy to move and accept it?
Happy to move and accept.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go on to agenda item 5, another reference from Cabinet, draft capital strategy 2024 to 25 and initial capital programme proposals 24 to 25 to 2028 to 2019. Again, it went to Cabinet on the 20th of July, and I believe this is again Gemma.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. So again, if I can share the slides, and again, very much a scene-setting report kicking off the capital strategy process. The capital strategy is a very dense document, and a lot of that content is set out by CIPFA and by kind of regulation. So a lot of that is content that we're required to put in the capital strategy. So in terms of the capital position, we know that it continues to be very challenging to deliver capital schemes. It's very expensive to deliver capital schemes, and often we're having some of those issues in terms of affordability of schemes. We know what the 24-25 likely funding will be, but we haven't got any firm projections beyond that point. And obviously, in addition to the general capital funding from Welsh Government, the council can choose to use reserves. and it can choose to use Section 106 funds, apply for grants, but also use unsupported borrowing to deliver capital screens. But obviously there is a revenue cost attached to that, which will obviously have an impact on those revenue proposals. In terms of the current indicative 5-year capital programme, this is set out by directorate here, and the housing improvement programme is separately identified there with 41 million, and obviously that links to our current housing improvement programme, which will be revised and reviewed as we go through the budget process. I think some of the key schemes that are included in that indicative capital strategy are things such as the allocation for disabled facility grants, and as I say, the housing improvement programme. We're thinking we're going to get an idea of settlement in December, and we are currently out asking directorates to submit capital bids. They will obviously go through a period of challenge and review with a view to bringing proposals back to committee in January. Apologies, I've skipped ahead of myself. This slide sets out the funding of the capital programme, which I've already touched on. So as I say, we're currently in the process of going out and asking directorates to submit capital bids. We will need to review that against the available funding. They'll be going to Strategic Insight Board in November. Obviously, we'll be looking to get settlement in around December time, and then bringing revised capital proposals to Cabinet and Scrutiny in January. For the housing improvement programme, there's slightly different timescale because we need to fit in with rent setting. So still looking to bring a report in January, but obviously slightly earlier in January, so we can hit those rent setting deadlines. But I think those committees are currently being discussed or requested. Those are the main points I wanted to pull out on that report. But again, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? I can see Councillor Lovelock-Edwards, the Vice Chair, has popped her hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Gemma. It is just you referenced the way in which the disabled facilities grant is going to be looked at going forward, and I just wanted to see if you were able to give us any more information on that, because my understanding is that that's going to make it more accessible to the wider community, and it's not going to be so restricted to I suppose help people remain in their homes for longer. Is that a correct assessment?
There certainly are proposals in terms of asking us to look at the way that we deliver disabled facility grants, and I see Marcus has come on screen. He's going to give you a far better answer on that than I can. What I was referencing is that there is provision for disabled facilities grant across the 5-year programme, but I'll let Marcus come in and give you his response here. Thank you.
Thanks, Gemma, and thanks, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards. I can give you a very general response. There is a report that's been prepared, which will be taken to Cabinet, we hope, next month, either on the 5th of October or possibly later in October, which will present a new draft independent living policy. That will align, or the intention is that policy will now align with Welsh Government guidance on disability grants for remaining in private properties and obviously private rented properties. The aim of that is obviously to slightly change the way we've done things. So in the past, obviously, you may be aware there was a means test placed on homeowners and also rented properties. That means test did obviously put a lot of people off, and they didn't meet the means test to actually get the facilities. It is a bit counterproductive, because all that means is that we end up having to get care packages to look after these people in their houses, which just raises the cost for the council going forward. So the independent living policy is taking on board a lot of advice from Welsh Government and the Audit Office and others who've made recommendations that the means testing system is changed. Basically, what we would be looking to do is to provide an alternative form of grant, which would tie any improvement grant awarded to as a charge to the property that's improved, and rather than that charge just lasting for 10 years, it would last for obviously the life of the person who's had the improvements made. That would allow the council to recover after sadly that person's passed away. That would allow the council to recover the full costs of the improvement and re-roll that back into the system. So it will cost more to start, but where this has already been implemented, what's tended to happen is after years 2, 3, and 4, the income that councils have received back via those charges has actually more than paid for the facility in the long run, and of course it means that more people can stay in their properties, and you're not having to look at things like alternative care packages, and so it does really facilitate independent living. So I've gone into it in quite a lot of detail there, but there is a report that will be coming to Cabinet in the next month which sets out the new policy and will deal with all those issues. So unless you've got any questions around specifically, and I can try and answer them, but that's basically the position we are in now.
No, thank you, Marcus, and thank you, Gemma. That was really sort of useful. And you know, obviously, it's going to be beneficial to us in terms of allowing and enabling people that dignity by remaining in their homes. So I look forward to the report. Thank you.
Councillor Campbell.
Hi, Gemma. In the table, it specifies pipeline schemes. What are they?
So pipeline schemes are schemes where we have yet to agree a full business case. So it's either schemes where there is currently some feasibility or initial design work that's being undertaken, or we're awaiting a business case. So it enables us to build the kind of funding implications into the programme and the cost of borrowing, because largely these schemes are financed through borrowing into our revenue programme. But it just highlights to committee that those schemes haven't had full approval to progress, and further work needs to be done before they're fully integrated into the capital programme.
So they haven't been like put out into specific like areas yet they've just kind of all been bundled into one thing at the moment.
So essentially we're ring fencing the funding or we're budgeting for the funding. So for instance, for St Richard Gwyn, some initial design and work has been undertaken, and feasibility work, but until that's been completed, we don't necessarily know that the wider scheme can progress. But we need to allow for the cost of delivering that scheme because we've started to undertake the design and feasibility. Whereas for the kind of non-treasury investment strategy element, because we're saying that that's going to be financed in part by prudential borrowing and in part by reserves, we need to budget for that reduction in reserves and budget for that likely borrowing that will need to take place. But obviously none of that will take place unless an investment scheme has been approved in accordance with the non-treasury investment strategy. Does that make sense as a response? Sorry, it's a little bit confused, but there's a few different schemes that have different dependencies, but it just means they're not fully approved to progress, I think, in essence.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Gemma.
Okay. Any further questions or comments on that item? Okay, now I know items 6 and 7 is still to go, but as we are doing financial reports and we do have Laura here as well, I am going to ask committee if they would be happy with me bringing agendas 8 and 9 forward so that we can have Laura do her bit as well now, all finance stuff together.
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Just to check, Chair, in terms of the recommendation for this.
Oh, crikey, yes. I knew there was something I'd forgotten.
For this capital report, are yourself and committee happy to any comments back to cabinet, or are you just happy to note?
Happy
So
to note,
Happy to
Chair.
note, Chair.
Happy to note.
Okay, happy to know. I
Thanks,
knew I was
Chair, that's
forgetting
good.
something, sorry. Okay, so agenda item 8 then is the Q1 revenue monitoring 2023 to 2024. So Laura, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for bringing the items forward. Much appreciated. So similar to Gemma, I've got some slides just to try and highlight the items most relevant to this committee, because I'm sure members will all note that the reports in items 8 and 9 are both fairly lengthy and obviously quite widespread across the council. So I've tried to focus the mind into what is actually affecting this committee. So if you'll bear with me, I'll just share my screen. Hopefully that's coming up.
Yeah, that's come up.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you. So revenue monitoring for Q1, which is 1st of April to 30th of June 2023. So obviously fairly early in the year. This is lifted from the report, which is a global table to cover the whole authority on a directorate basis. But as I say, unfortunately, specifically for this committee, the remit for this committee is scattered far and wide within those departments and directorates. So I've tried to, as I say, try to pin it down. But the one thing I wanted to bring up on this one slide is the environment request, because I see that one of the recommendations on the report is to note environments. So just to explain, there are two environments relevant to this committee. One is for £20,000, which is a technical adjustment, basically, for central recharges, allocating from the private housing budget or DFG budget to regeneration, but both within that place line, that £60,000 that's highlighted there. And the other is a new post that's been funded for empty property enforcement officer. So that's a transfer from policy where a cost pressure was approved for last year, and a £60,000 budget now is going into the place budget. So I just wanted to highlight those two on that table. And then I'm going to move in and drill in a little bit more to the items relevant for this committee. So firstly, we've got key pressures by directorate. So
sorry, Laura, can I just check?
yeah.
The screen isn't moving.
Oh no, is it not?
Yeah, if you click on the next slide or put on the slideshow, it might come on, but it's still showing the title screen.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's not very helpful, is it? Okay, let's try this.
I got so caught up listening to what you were saying, I hadn't even noticed the screen.
Oh,
right, Laura, if you click on it now,
right, bear with me then.
go.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is that any better?
overall revenue projected position.
That's the one. Yes. Yeah. That's that 60,000 I was just referring to there with the two environments. Apologies for that. Obviously, it looked fine on my screen. So unfortunately, yeah. So the £60,000, it's all within place, but it's a 20,000 in and out for the technical adjustment, basically, and a 60,000 from policy into place for this new officer, empty property enforcement. Okay, so hopefully we're back on track. Is it moving along now?
Key pressures?
Yay, brilliant. Yeah. Okay, so key pressures by directorate relevant to this committee. Within the environment and housing figures that you've just seen, there are three flagged pressures that officers have wanted to highlight. Animal welfare investigations in the regulatory service linked to illegal dog breeding. Accommodation costs, obviously homelessness issues, I should say, and the cost of providing support to assist Ukrainian families moving into the Eagleswell school site. The other pressure is highlighted in place, which is private housing and the disabled facility grants fee income, which is behind profile currently and likely not to be able to meet the target at year end. So it's being flagged up quite early that it's probably not going to be achievable due to the lack of available contractors to carry out the works. Next slide is projected revenue outturn position. across the committee. So youth offending service is it's obviously early in the year, it's Q1, so you would expect a lot are going to forecast a break even position, no planned use of reserves at this stage. Similarly for regulatory services, break even, no planned use of reserves. Council fund housing, beg your pardon, £45,000 adverse variance or over budget, if you like. Plan to draw down from reserves to cover the costs of Cadoxton House, plus the match funding for the rural housing enabler post. In private housing, we've got a £90,000 adverse variance forecast, again, due to fees and savings issues. Plans to draw down from the reserve, from the private housing reserve. In addition, a figure to cover the occupational therapist post within that service. Savings targets highlighted in the remit of this committee, listed here. 3 for general fund housing, pre-tenancy budget, pre-tenancy advisor budget, beg your pardon, Vale assisted tenancy budget, £26,000 budget has been achieved and adjusted. Review senior officer recharges to HRA to ensure no cross-subsidisation, 33,000 achieved. Review support function, 25,000 achieved. Regulatory services, there's been a reduction in the contribution towards the shared regulatory service. So that's literally a reduction in the Vale's share of 21,000. And private housing is this £20,000 target for income for increased DFG provision by removal of means testing, which is not likely to be able to be achieved this year. So that's being flagged up as an issue. So that's it as far as the report goes. So any questions?
Does anybody have any questions? No. Okay. We have recommendations on that the position with regard to the authority's 2023 to 24 revenue budget be noted. That's the first one. Are we happy with that recommendation?
Yes,
Happy
Chair.
to accept it. Yeah. And the second is that members note the environments included as part of this report as set out in table 1. Are we happy to accept that recommendation?
Happy.
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. Let's go on to the next one now then, which is the capital monitoring for the period 1st of April to 30th of June 2023.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll try and share my screen. Hopefully it goes a bit better than the last time. Which one have we got here? Right. Can you see a capital monitoring
Yes.
page? Excellent.
Well, we could.
Lovely. Oh, no, you can.
Now we see your list of folders and files.
Now you see it. Now you don't. Right, I'll leave it over there. Apologies. I'll be looking at another screen, so bear with me. Okay, so if I where did I go? Slideshow. Where did I go? Slideshow. Okay, from the beginning. Okay, so capital monitoring Q1, again, same period, 1st of April to 2nd of June. Again, the report is widespread across the council, so the report gives an update on the Q1 progress on the budget, which is listed in the report. Oh, beg your pardon, that was me. Many areas continue to experience increasing costs, which means that tenders are needing to be renegotiated, which also then means delays in actual performance of the schemes. So even though there's no slippage reported in this report in Q1, we're likely to be starting to see some slippage requests coming through in the next report, in the Q2 report. So the summary here, again, as I say, it's a global summary across the board. and it's highlighting a fairly sizable programme of over £125 million. So with the issues that officers are coming across with costs and tenders, that's likely to be a bit of a movable feast as we're moving forward. So again, this is a high-level summary across directorate as to the approved programme, the approved budgets, and the forecast outturn. So, obviously early doors, but at the moment there are a few variances actually being flagged up, but that will move on obviously as the months go on. So highlights as far as this committee are concerned. There's an item for a new grant, target hardening grant within the council fund housing area, of £44,000 from Welsh Government for the installation of CCTV cameras and intruder kits. The next one is a transfer. So it's two schemes relating to Carteret, Porthkerry and Salisbury Road. Two small schemes which are slipped from a previous year because the works are kind of overlapping another project, which is Carteret, Porthkerry drainage repairs and underpinning. The decision's been made to merge the three budgets, so merge the two slipped items into the current Carteret Porthkerry budget. So the proposal is that there's one new budget of 256,000, and it's called Carteret Porthkerry Residential Home Drainage Repairs and Underpinning of Building. But it will be shown in the social services remit going forward. So even though in the Appendix 1 shows the list of projects relevant to this committee at the moment, that Salisbury Road number 91 YOS external repairs phase 2 is included in that table. That's likely to drop out and it will transfer to social services to merge with this Carteret Porthkerry scheme. The only other thing to note is that a delegated authority has been actioned to allocate the housing improvement programme. The £45.019 million has been allocated across projects, and they're listed in Table 5, paragraph 2.26 of the report, which reflects this change as well as approved slippage from 2022-23 last year, and the total housing improvement programme budget of 53.711 is broken down in the final column on Table 5. That's it from me. Any questions?
Councillor Lloyd-Selby.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really helpful, clear summary of the report. I'm just curious in terms of the target hardening grant, not something I've ever heard of before. CCTV intruder kits for where? For what area of the council's operations?
Mike may be coming in.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd-Selby. You'll actually hear target hardening in two reports. So in this report, it'll also be mentioned in the later referral from Cabinet regarding corporate safeguarding. The items listed are actually within the homes of individuals. So, for example, we allocate and have allocated in the past funding from the Council Supporting People programme, which we allocate to victims of domestic abuse or domestic violence. Effectively, we provide CCTV and other measures that you've just mentioned to victims' homes. Therefore, those residents feel obviously much safer, and in many instances would prefer to remain in their homes rather than perhaps going to a refuge or to move home to another property in another area. In terms of the work that we do, 100%, we obviously assess the outcomes from the work that we do. 100% of all victims of abuse or violence indicate that they are satisfied and happy with the works that we undertake. Just to reassure, however, there is a risk assessment undertaken at the outset to ensure that the work is necessary, but also mitigates risks that we identify. Clearly, target hardening isn't suitable for all situations and circumstances, and on occasion people do need to move out of their homes because of the significance of the risks associated. So yes, it is in individual domestic properties rather than perhaps traditional CCTV, which you see obviously along the street scene in the Vale.
Thanks, Mike. Chair, if I may, just a follow-up.
Yes.
Question. So thank you, Mike. I wasn't aware of that. Really, really interesting. And just to check, is that a needs-led grant application? So we're continuously assessing people who find themselves in that risk position. So is that something that the council would apply for on a regular basis? Are there costs that we're meeting outside of that grant application?
So it's a one-off grant. So it was grant made available this year. Yes, we were required to provide needs information in order to apply for the grant. And I think I mentioned just slightly earlier that prior to this year, the target hardening that had been going on in previous years had been entirely funded by the council through its Supporting People programme, which in itself is a Welsh Government grant.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Councillor Haynes, if you'd like to come in. You're on mute.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for telling me I'm on mute.
I've been doing it all day.
I'm being new to the committee, so I'm not really au fait with a lot of things here. But if we go to Appendix 1, on Appendix 1, there's a lot of emergency powers used for this, that and the other. I just wondered if there's some clarification of what's that about. Okay. I can go to it and read it out if you want.
No, I've got it. Thanks, Councillor. So emergency powers are any change to the capital programme has to be approved, ideally by cabinet. But because the need, obviously, to pursue capital projects and actually get the work going once you've got the funding, unfortunately, the cabinet doesn't always meet quickly enough for that sort of process to kick in. So if there is a kind of urgent need to proceed and have a project in the capital programme and have it approved, it has to go through emergency powers, which is approved by Chief Executive, the leader and senior officers. So it's kind of a quick way of getting the project approved into the capital programme so officers can continue with the work. Does that make sense?
Yes, I would imagine then, to be honest, if you don't mind me saying, that this would be highlighted more in any presentation if a lot of emergency powers have been used. I would imagine that would be important to this committee. Just a comment, that is, Chair, if you don't mind me saying.
Okay. Mike, would you like to come in?
Yes, thanks, Laura. Thanks, Councillor Haynes. That's a really pertinent question. It might be helpful if I give committee an example of where emergency powers, certainly for my service area, are being used at the moment. Traditionally, we enter into fixed term contracts and fixed cost contracts. Traditionally, our contracts gave a tender a requirement to fix their price for 90 days. Because of the issues at the moment in relation to inflationary costs and increasing and burgeoning interest costs, many of our contractors will no longer fix for 90 days. Consequently, in order for us to approve and to process and enter into contract for that fixed price contract, many contractors are indicating that they will only fix for 28 days, and in some cases less. If we didn't have the ability to enter into emergency powers, the result would be we would have to go back out to tender because those burgeoning costs are often outside of the council's financial regulatory framework, to allow for officers to approve excess in relation to the original budget. But that might be helpful as an example of where we've had to use them more often, probably in the last 12 months, than we've probably had to use them in the past.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. Do we have any other questions on that item? No. Okay, so I'm trying to do everything in one hand, so I've got a cat lying on my arm. Oh. Recommendations for that, there are, hang on, have I got the right page? Yes. There are 4 recommendations, and the first one is that the progress made on delivering the 2023 to 24 capital programme within the remit of the committee be noted in the attached Appendix 1. Are we happy with that? Yes, I see a few nods and a few thumbs up.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. That the use of the second one is that the use of delegated authority within the remit of the committee, as set out in paragraph 2.4 of the report, be noted. Are we happy with that?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Number 3, that the use of emergency powers within the remit of the committee, as detailed in the attached Appendix 1 to the report, be noted. Happy tonight?
Yes, Chair.
And that we note the changes to the 2023 to 24 and future years capital programme within the remit of the committee, as set out in a paragraph 2.3 of the report. Happy to note?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Laura and Gemma, for being here tonight. I believe that brings an end to all the financial items. So thank you. You go on, get out and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for your time, and thank you, team, as well, for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
So agenda, we'll go back on the agenda now to item number 6, draft of Vale of Glamorgan Council Annual Self-Assessment 2022 to 23. This went to Cabinet on the 7th of September. Okay. So, yeah, Miles.
Thank you, Chair. That's for me. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I don't have a presentation for you, but I do have a very long report that will try and summarise and make sense for committee. So, firstly, to say that this is part of our performance management framework. Members will know that we have a corporate plan that goes from 2020 to 2025. A requirement within that corporate planning process is to produce annual delivery plans every year, so 5, 1 each year. And there's also a requirement under legislation to undertake a self-assessment of our work against the annual delivery plan. So members that have been around perhaps as long as me, I'm not sure if anybody has, but will remember various tests over the years. There was compulsory competitive tendering back in the 90s, the best value process in the noughties, and now the legislation requires us to undertake self-assessment. So this report is our draft self-assessment for the period 2020 to 2023, and the detailed self-assessment in draft is attached at Appendix A. So what I'll do, Chair, I'll just take you through the pertinent points of the report. So committee are asked to consider the draft and to make any judgments or views known to Cabinet so that they can use those views in preparation of the final document. This is only part of the consultation process. There's a whole raft of further consultation to take place before it's actually finalised, and that is detailed in 2.19 in this report. So firstly, to say, just to reiterate, this is a legal requirement for us under the Local Government Election Wales Act 2021. So we have to do this and make it available to the regulators. So as I say, the draft assessment is at Appendix A, and it's a position on the Council's performance over the past year in delivering against our annual delivery plan, which, as I say, is a snapshot of the corporate plan and our wellbeing objectives. So it's intended to be an honest and balanced account of our achievements and challenges, and it also identifies areas where further progress is required. This document, when finalised, then will inform our annual delivery plan for 24-25. So you can see it's an ongoing process. So in terms of the report and the key issues for consideration, we used a number of assessments and judgments in preparation of the self-assessment findings. It was a very significant piece of work, as you'd appreciate. Some of the things we looked at were quarterly, annual performance and risk review reports associated with our key actions, performance metrics aligned to our annual delivery plan and wellbeing objectives, findings from internal audit and risk work programs, so also work of our internal audit team, key insights from the annual governance statement and internal audit opinion. We will take into account the views of members of the public. Clearly, we take into account the views of elected members and our officers. So we have a whole raft of measures that we looked at in putting this together. In addition, there's a peer, what we call a peer challenge, which is each director has to present the work of its directorate over the last 12 months, and it has to present its findings using the 5 ways of working that are identified in the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. So that in itself is a considerable piece of work for each director. I went through that myself. We are then interrogated, if that's the right word, by elected members who are on either the relevant committees or a cabinet, and our peers. So another director also inquires as to why we come to a judgment for the position of our services over the period. So in terms of the way the report is set up, that's detailed in 2.7 of this document. So hopefully it flows logically. We have taken into account the views of elected members on previous iterations of this document to try and make it a bit more of an easy read. The detailed analysis by each of the 4 wellbeing objectives in the corporate plan is considered, and the report provides an overall performance status on all the actions and measures for those objectives, and provides a RAG status, red, amber, green, as you've heard us mention in the past. Item 2.10 of the report, in response to elected members' feedback, we've also incorporated a section which provides an overview of the findings and learning from the public opinion survey and our complaints and compliments process to ensure greater visibility. For me in particular, in my service area, the views of the public is incredibly important. So we take our complaints very seriously, and compliments. We do have compliments on occasions, and we weave those into the planning documents for the future, and it helps shape our services. So within this context, we believe that on balance we've met our annual delivery plan commitments for 2022-23. We've got a hell of a lot of work to do. We've got huge challenges with the environment and huge challenges with poverty, but in respect of the challenges we set ourselves in the annual delivery plan, we've attributed a judgment of good. And the reason we've done that is that we've achieved 85% of our in-year activities and performance targets, which is a good performance. Within the section relating to the council's use of resources and governance, our annual directorate self-assessment has been used to consider how the council is managing people, finance, assets and risk, and that was part of the peer review work that we did. As I say, I took part in that. In terms of our judgment on that, we've judged our management of resources as good. There are some areas of weakness and some areas of strength, but on balance, we've made a judgment of good. And in terms of our internal and external regulated performance, we have suggested a reasonable assurance, and that's based on the judgments provided both internally and externally by our auditors. So a programme of engagement activities, as I say, is scheduled for this month, targeting local people, businesses, council staff and other key stakeholders. You will have seen on social media our public opinion survey is out. We're also having workshops involving key partners, including the Public Service Board, staff workshops and various social media comms. So the draft self-assessment report will also be widely circulated, with a request for comments from key partners, including the recognised trade unions. And the process for this is detailed, as I say, in 2.19 of this report. So in preparation, I understand that all elected members, including members of this committee and the Governance and Audit Committee, were invited to join an informal briefing and have an overview of the self-assessment process. I think this was in July this year, and also to provide feedback and suggestions on format. Those comments were taken into account in this document. And just to conclude then, Chair, committee is asked to consider the draft self-assessment and make any views or judgments so that they can be considered by Cabinet in preparation of the final document. So I understand it's a very hefty piece of work with a lot of inputs. There is time for members to comment should they so wish outside of this committee, because it does take a lot of reading and consideration. But this committee is asked to consider the report as is and provide any comments back to Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Miles. Do we have any comments? I can see Councillor Haynes and Councillor Campbell have their hand up. Councillor Haynes is up first.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments, if you don't mind, Miles, and thank you for the report. It was I got to say, it was what I've been able to read, it was an easy read and it was well put together. I congratulate you on that. I think it could be a little shorter if there's some way of making it shorter. It is a bit of a document to go through. And the only other comment is it's not really anything you can do about it. It's overly, I would say, positive compared to the views I receive from residents generally across the board. But that's a problem with self-assessment, I imagine. But the main point to take really is I thought it was an easy read, and I congratulate you for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Shall I respond, Chair? Are you happy?
Of course, you can respond if you wish.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. I'd like to take credit for the report, but unfortunately, I didn't put it together. So I must give Tom Bowring and his team full credit for that. But I take on board fully your comments. I was chatting to another councillor this morning. We almost need a bite-sized version of the document, don't we, just to make sure we can grasp all the pertinent points without having to read 60-odd pages. So I accept that. I also accept that the judgments, because I study social media, and I accept the judgments of our residents are not always as positive. And I think it's important to say that the judgment is in respect of what we said we'd do, not what people expect we should do. And there's a bit of a gap, unfortunately, a lot of it linked to the fact we don't have the money to do what we'd like to do. But I accept that, and you know, certainly it's a comment that perhaps should go back to Cabinet, that there needs to be perhaps a bit more humility, I guess, in the judgments, because it's all well and good patting ourselves on the back, but we're not really the ones that should judge the services we provide to our residents. So it's the residents who should judge that. So yeah, certainly we'll take those comments back. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Campbell, if you'd like to come in.
Hi, Miles. I'm just a little bit confused on the timeline of the actual document. Is this supposed to be a retrospective document, or is this actually a live document? Because there's pieces of work and projects that are referenced within this document that are actually currently live projects, or they're projects that are actually haven't happened yet. So they're referencing the completion of the active travel route in Roost. That hasn't actually been completed yet. They're referencing the works on Celtic Way Park. That hasn't actually broken ground yet. And I'm just confused as to if this is a retrospective document, we're looking back on 22 to 23 as, the year of the council, for example, then that work shouldn't be included in those years. If that work should be included in this year's self-assessment. So I'm just a bit confused about where the dates are for this document as opposed to just 22 to 23. Are we actually looking at, a tax year, or what are we looking at time-wise? Is this a looking back document, or is this actually a live document that's constantly moving forward?
Yeah, it's a fair point, Councillor Campbell. It is a 22-23, so it is a retrospective look. So it's the 1st of March 2022 1st of April 2022 to the 31st of March 23. If a project has started within that period, then it could be included. So if it's not started, then it shouldn't be included. It may not be finished. And the problem with these things is, as soon as we start talking about it, it's almost out of date. So we are chasing ourselves a little bit with it, but it's the majority of the work in that document should be 22-23. Anything else that's in there should have started in that period. May not have been completed, but that's the snapshot. So if you think there's projects within there that have not even been thought about, certainly only this year, then I'm happy to take them comments back to Tom and get that considered. But it should have at least started in that period, 22-23.
Okay, thanks, Miles.
Councillor Hanks.
Thank you, Chair. Miles, could I just ask, one of the challenges that we have in this is the recruitment and retention of staff. Could I just ask if this is going forward in the right direction or not, please?
Yeah, I think retention is not necessarily the issue for us, not in most areas, but recruitment is challenging in certain areas, and I think that's probably because the market has moved on in certain disciplines, particularly some of the engineering disciplines, and the remuneration is considerably higher than ourselves. So there are pockets of difficult posts to fill. We don't generally have a large turnover of staff. In fact, our turnover figures in most areas are quite low, but we are looking as a management team at our job evaluation arrangements to make sure that they're fit for purpose, because we do have an issue at the minute. And I'll just give you a group of workers as an example. With our refuse collection drivers, the HGV drivers, and they're currently receiving a market forces payment, because with everything that's happened over the last few years, including Brexit as an example, the rates of pay for those drivers in the market has exceeded considerably what we were paying them. So we've got to keep a constant eye on that. And we have to make sure that our job evaluation process is fit for purpose, make sure that we're competitive with our other councils at the very least, but also make sure that we're competitive with the market. One of the things we're also looking at is other ways of encouraging staff to come and to stay. So benefits that are not necessarily remuneration. One of those that is a classic is flexible working arrangements, particularly for people who've got caring responsibilities. So we're looking at all these things to try and help recruit. Well, I wouldn't say we have a particular problem across the council. We just have some pockets of difficult to fill posts for various reasons. Sometimes the market, sometimes these particular disciplines are not coming through the colleges as they were. And that's the truth in some of the engineering disciplines I'm responsible for, that the people aren't being trained and are coming through as in the numbers that they were previously. But I wouldn't say we have any major recruitment or retention problems. And I would say, wouldn't I, been here 41 years, the council is still a very good place to work.
Okay, thank you, Miles.
Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo, I think it was Councillor Haynes made the comment on the language in terms of the document being an easy read, and I just want to check that in terms of how we communicate with the public, there are those other facilities, not just such in obviously offering it in Welsh language, but offering it in an easy read format to widen participation. And again, for as an older people's champion, ensuring that there are other means and mechanisms, not just online, for people in which to engage. And I want to embrace the digital strategy that's in place and how we broaden in that. But the reality is there are still a lot of people who don't have access. And I just want to pick up on a couple of points as well in terms of some comments that have been made in terms of judgment. And I think that I want to place on record our thanks to staff, because what we've seen, and you referenced this too, Miles, is that social media has now become so toxic, and it's where the keyboard warriors are sort of where fact and fiction are, where fiction is becoming more readily accepted than fact. And I think it's incumbent on us and as councillors to ensure that residents are given an open and honest assessment of where we are, because today we've seen an economic picture that's been put out that is going to sort of ensure, or sort of going to mean that as councillors we'll be having even more difficult decisions to make in the coming months and year. And I think it's incumbent on us to ensure that residents understand what we are able to offer in terms of statutory obligations, and as you've referenced, what we would like to put in place, but we simply can't because of cost pressures. And I think that's on us more than, you know, to support staff, because increasingly there is a toxicity in how staff are spoken to. And the feedback that I've had is that we are becoming rather intolerant. And I think we should, as councillors, do all that we reasonably can. And that is not to sort of absent ourselves from calling into sort of question any of the decisions made, and sort of, you know, highlighting either bad sort of customer service or poor quality or poor service from the council. But remember, there are people behind these job titles, there are people behind these telephone lines and from the website. And I think there's something that this document, you know, is something that we could all work towards sort of doing on that. And I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Chair, if I briefly, yeah, I fully agree.
Of course, Miles.
All formats of the document in easy reading way. I will take that back to Tom. I'm sure you got that plan when the document is finalised anyway. And I do agree. The trouble is, I guess, the council needs to put this information out and not have it twisted. But when there's a vacuum of information, then it gets filled with things that are negative, unfortunately. And there's a few, when I write to people, when they complain to me about services, I give them a few points, and it seems they don't know these things that I'm giving them. And I'll give you one as an example. I'm not making any points here other than to say that this is a situation. When people say to me, all I get from my council tax is the services that I provide, street lighting, dog fouling, whatever, and I will say to them, 70% of the council's budget is spent on social care and education. 9% of the budget is spent on the areas that I provide the services for. Now, I'm not making any point there because young people and our vulnerable people are very important to look after. What I'm trying to explain to the public is, do you understand how the council spends its money? And I think we need to do a lot more of that in the budget setting process for next year, because the challenges are not going to get any less. And I will say this, on every occasion I've had this conversation with people about how we spend our money, they go, oh, I didn't know that. And I think we need to get more of that information out. There'll always be the twisters and the negative people. They'll always be there, and that's fine. But you can drown them out with the right information. And my experience is that you can never provide too much information to the public, and honest information as well. And I always try and do that, and I know my officers do. But I know as part of the budget setting process, we're aware of this. We didn't have enough responses last year to our budget consultation. And we need to make sure that we engage in a way people want to be engaged, rather than the way we think they want to be engaged, because often we've done that in the past. So all good points, Councillor Lovelock Edwards. I'll take them all back. But certainly we need to basically, if we can say to the public, I'm sorry, we just cannot match their expectations, because then I guess they will lower the expectations, and hopefully then the responses will be a bit more realistic in social media. But yeah, I do read all the feeds, and I read them for the effects they'll have on my staff, not on me. But it can get a little bit, as you know, as members yourself, it can get a little bit difficult, can it? But we can help that, I'm sure. Yeah, we can help that. We can help that by providing the right information out there, and that's what we're going to try and do over the next so many months.
Thank you, Miles. Thank you.
Before I bring Councillor Lois Selby in, I just want to make a comment on the easy read thing. From what I can remember, the council do have policies in place to make documents plain language, so therefore easy to read. That's what I can vaguely remember from when I was working there as a temp. Mind, I haven't been there since 2016, so I doubt that's changed, though. I very much doubt it's changed. I do think there is a policy for plain language documents. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Lois Selby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mars. I think you've made my points for me, really. My sense in skimming the document, because I have skimmed it, is despite the enormous challenges, there's a huge amount of incredibly good work that continue. So as the Tackling Poverty Champion, my eye went to the fact that this local authority has seen 90% of infant school children taking up free school meals. We're the highest performing local authority in Wales in relation to that. And the report also rightly highlights the impact of continued cost of living pressures on services such as the illegal moneylenders service, which, you know, is having to step in where people in desperation have borrowed money that's then put them in an even more difficult and desperate situation. And I guess my overall impression just echoes what you and Councillor Lovelock-Edwards have been saying, that it does feel to me that in terms of tone, perhaps at the beginning of the report, we could say more to make it clear to residents that we're reporting against the things we said we would do. We're prioritising essential services, and particularly those for the most vulnerable in our society. This is not a list of, this is not the extent of our ambition. We would like to do more, we simply don't have the resources to do it. And as I say, the report does reference cost of living pressures and the fact that they're likely to continue. I'm just not sure we're explaining that as clearly as we might to help residents understand how we're prioritising spending their council tax, for example, and the resources that we have. And it just feels to me we could put some of that front and centre in terms of messaging, because the reality is people won't work their way through the whole report. And I also think that there's probably something about just centering some of that really positive messaging around what we are achieving despite the challenges, and that we want to encourage people to engage with us through things like the survey. You know, because if they don't think the way that we're prioritising scarce resources is right, they've got an opportunity to tell us and to inform that process. So it's just resetting that messaging front and centre, that this is very much a live process. We want to hear from people. These are the priorities they've given us to date that we're pursuing, but, you know, we very much want to hear from them if they think we're not getting that right.
Yeah, I fully agree, Chair. And I think if you feel that we should look at the initial sort of start of the document, just to have a bit of reality check, I guess, and say, you know, we are spending a lot of money on these high priority services for different groups, and this is why we're doing it. We'd love to do a lot more. I would say that would be maybe give a bit more of a reality to the document, because I am concerned about Councillor Haynes's point, is that we don't want to be criticised for saying everything's fine when, you know, there are areas where it's not. So yeah, that's a point well made, I think, Councillor.
Yeah, it's not about failure. It's exactly about what you're saying. It's about reality check.
Yeah.
And my experience is exactly the same. You know, when residents contact me and I try to go back and just explain, look, there's some tough choices to make, and we've had to make some tough decisions. 99% of the time, the response I get is people saying thank you, because they've not understood that, you know, any more than I understood it. So I think everything we can do to just communicate some of those pressures, not defensiveness, it's the reality, isn't it? I think the environments that local authorities are having to operate in at the moment, and the continuing and unknown impact of the continuing cost of living.
Okay, thank you. Now, as this is another reference from Cabinet, we really should just note this. However, are there any comments that anybody wants to send back?
Chair, I just wanted to check that, because obviously a number of members have made comments that, and Miles has obviously discussed some of these as well, that might be worth going back in terms of consideration by Cabinet, and obviously Tom Bowring and his team. I don't know if it'd be useful to sort of summarise those now, just for the record.
If we could,
we've got obviously a number of comments, firstly from Councillor Haynes, and just to paraphrase you, Councillor Haynes, and please step in if this is not correct, to look at perhaps a more sort of easy read version of the annual assessment, just for making it more accessible to the public. Also, and I think this is a theme that other members have raised as well, to also look at, as obviously the performance about resident views and concerns about certain services. But as some of the other members have said, to balance that with obviously an honest assessment of what the council can currently do around cost due to cost of living pressures and having to prioritise, you know, key services. I don't know if those are the type of things or if there's anything else members want to add.
Councillor Ludwig-Edwards has her hand up. I
Yeah.
think she wants to add something.
No, I think it was just to sort of reinforce the point that Councillor Lloyd Selby made, which is about sort of that reference or sort of assessment on the reality of the situation as the sort of the starting premise. You don't want to start from I don't want to sound like a prophet of doom, but as I think reality check was the term that was used, and I think now more than ever, where we are going to be increasingly facing these pressures, we need to sort of be more blunt with what, you know, with the residents as to what we are actually having to deal with. I don't know if I picked that up right.
Councillor Lloyd Selby.
Yeah, thank you. And the only thing I would just be anxious not to lose is that messaging that this council has a listening ear. We want to hear from residents about the issues that matter to them. There are various ways that they can engage with us, and we would encourage them to take advantage of those opportunities and to tell us if we're missing opportunities for engagement, that we're a listening council and we want to prioritise the needs of residents.
Okay. Happy with that, guys? Yep. Mark?
No, Chair, I just wanted to check that committee were happy for those comments then to be included as like a summary to go back to Cabinet.
Yes.
And if there were any other comments want to be added. I know Councillor Campbell referred to sort of timelines in the report. I don't know if that needs to be reiterated as well, different definition of timelines or clarity on projects.
Councillor Campbell?
I'm happy to go back to Miles and Tom after the meeting on specific incidents that I've picked up, and to kind of reiterate with them and converse with them about if it's appropriate for that to be in the report, to see if that kind of links up with their timeline, if everyone's happy for that, rather than to kind of include that in this in the comments that go back to Cabinet.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. In that case, Chair, if you and committee are happy to include the other comments that have been raised now as a referral back to Cabinet, if obviously people are happy to propose and second that.
Are we happy for that to go back to Cabinet?
Yeah, happy to propose.
Yes, Chair.
Okay. I think we've got a few seconders there as well, so yeah. Okay. So the next item is the annual corporate safeguarding report. Again, a reference that went to Cabinet on the 7th of September.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be taking this item. As you mentioned, went to Cabinet on the 7th of September. There's a reference and recommendation from Cabinet to be referred to all scrutiny committees, as well as governance and audit. In terms of the report itself, attached to the report at Appendix 1 is the annual corporate safeguarding report for 22-23, and the report itself highlights the rationale and the reasoning behind the importance of safeguarding, both in terms of a statutory framework together with guidance, which is referenced under the background to the report. I won't dwell on that. I know that members are acutely aware of their statutory responsibilities. Not only members, but officers and everyone has a responsibility for safeguarding and protecting our citizens. So the key issues for consideration, paragraph, there are a number of areas which have been highlighted within the report itself, particularly for your interest. Firstly, the council has now implemented an electronic system for the DBS checks, and as you can see, that has sped up the time it takes in order to undertake pre-employment checks, but also makes it easier for applicants to apply for their DBS checks online, and then for approval and tracking by the council, with most cases within 48 hours. And just to give you a bit of background to that, so for example, when we started to receive Ukrainian families and individuals through the programme, we were required to undertake DBS checks on hosts, and for the vast majority of those, we were able to undertake those within that 24 to 48 hour timeline, which was vitally important to ensure, as I say, the safety and safeguarding responsibilities for the Ukrainian families and children that were coming to us. The next item is around members and DBS checks for members. In 2022-23, Cabinet took a decision that all elected members should have a basic DBS check, and for some other members who hold specific roles, that they should have an enhanced check. Following an audit undertaken in November 2022, all outstanding checks were then followed up, and we're pleased to say that all elected member checks were completed by the end of August 2023. The Social Services Directorate has experienced ongoing and sustained increase within their safeguarding activity, and even though, as intimated within the report before you today is to consider those areas which fall within this specific committee's remit, you'll note some of that information contained within the annual safeguarding report under the Social Services Directorate. Just wanted to highlight some of the resources and legal considerations, and I think partly the point that was made earlier around priorities and resources that was made in the earlier report. Now, the report indicates that there are no direct resource implications arising from the corporate safeguarding work that we undertake. But there is a flag under the financial paragraph which recognises that there are significant pressures within our social services teams, and there's a review going on at the moment to ensure that we are responding directly to those that need our services, which are considered to be at risk. And as I say, that's not wishing to limit reports of safeguarding activity, but an acknowledgement that we do receive reports which aren't necessarily followed up in terms of requiring specific service responses. And finally, just to note guard that there is a regional safeguarding board for both Cardiff and the Vale of Glamorgan Council, and as you can see, the council contributes to the running of that board to the tune of just over £32,000 last year. If I take members then to the annual report itself, and if I direct you to D in the report, which reflects the activities undertaken within the area of housing and neighbourhood services. Give me a second. Environment and housing services. And you can see that the report is broken down into the various service areas. In terms of housing, we reflect that remains a key priority for our services, and we regularly monitor all of our safeguarding concerns regularly. All staff are trained and continue to receive regular update training in safeguarding and related themes. We have some staff. Nick Jones is on the call today, on the meeting today. Nick is specifically trained, for example, to undertake the responsibility of chair or reviewer of some of the child and adult practice reviews that are undertaken by the Cardiff and Vale Regional Safeguarding Board. Not only that, we also raise awareness for our frontline staff on a regular basis. And for example, it may be worthy of note that, for example, in terms of accessing our residents and our tenants, our staff within our housing repairs service probably attend most of our properties more regularly than most, and all of our frontline building maintenance staff equally undertake and promote safeguarding practice and undertake referrals. The report goes on to say that we also attend the relevant multi-agency meetings and working at the moment with our tenant profiling project, which is highlighting individuals that we may previously not been aware of potentially at risk, but now allowing us, using that intelligent-led approach, which is mentioned there, to actually target resources and interventions towards individuals. In the table associated, you can see some of the number of multi-agency referrals the service area has made over the year, and you'll note that all children placed in temporary accommodation by the council automatically submit a MAR form, a multi-agency referral form, to colleagues in safeguarding to ensure that there is knowledge and sight of any children that may be of concern. We also focused on some learning that came as a result of the pandemic. We continued to run our coordination cell, which was following Welsh Government guidance during COVID. That continues to now meet as a business as usual intervention, where that group discusses particular individuals who we identify at risk or vulnerable to risk, specifically around homelessness, and make obviously the group itself includes colleagues from a variety of other organisations, statutory and non-statutory, and enables us to provide and to respond in a holistic way to any issues that that arise. The report goes on to reflect that the council is still, and I think it's been mentioned a couple of times today, we are still under enormous pressure in terms of temporary accommodation and have to continue to use bed and breakfast as an emergency response due to the numbers of homeless individuals that are accessing services from the council. But as I say, hopefully that provides reassurance that we are providing wraparound support services to individuals in temporary accommodation and our hotel provision. And there's references there to what that looks like in practice. Moving on to safeguarding activity within community safety service, primarily that's related to violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. And we continue to develop our strategic work with Cardiff as part of a regional response, and we're in the process or have in the process of bringing forward to council shortly, to cabinet shortly, a revised regional strategy, which will come in the coming months. There's an indication there of the numbers of cases, and as you can see, that 285 multi-agency risk assessment cases conferences were considered in the year. And interesting to reflect, there is a decrease from the previous year, but we account for that in the fact that we also introduced new processes, and we now undertake twice weekly discussions, which enable us to have conversations at a much earlier stage and intervene at a much earlier level, which means that the MARAC cases predominantly then are dealing with the high risk cases, rather than low and medium cases. There's also, as I say, a range of statistics there that I won't go through. And just to flag, though, the dark service, which was lauded by the council, which was introduced a couple of years ago. So a specific bespoke service operated via staff in the community safety team, where we receive public protection notices direct from South Wales Police. A significant number. However, as you can you note from the report, there is a concern and an issue that the police, following their own protocol, will only refer cases to the dark service if there is consent. That is a concern for us and a concern for the council, and we're continuing through the community safety partnership to promote and to suggest that the police, South Wales Police, need to review their protocol to ensure that all incidents that they attend where they identify risk with or without consent should be referred, so that we can look to see what interventions may be possible. I think people might not consent because they will be concerned that the council, or implications of consent that the council may become involved. But as I say, the service that we provide is independent, is ensuring that we are able to provide services in a supportive way, rather than perhaps what the individual may understand or believe. I won't mention the target hardening. I think I referred that it would come up in a later report. Safe to say that we've target hardened in the year 105 properties within the Verde Morgan, and I also mentioned 100% positivity in terms of those residents who have had the target hardening in terms of work that we've undertaken. We've been undertaking over the year an awful lot of training for staff, and as you can see, across the course of the year, 3,104 staff members from the council have completed level 1 training, which is for those staff that are involved in safeguarding activities directly with the public. That's 94% of the eligible workforce, and we're currently rolling out Ask and Act, which is the next level to individuals, and we've undertaken 51 sessions this year, with 704 attendees completing level 2 Ask and Act training. I'll move on through ASB and Channel Prevent to shared regulatory services. Committee have had a number of bespoke reports over the last 12 months from colleagues in SRS and partners providing safeguarding services to residents. Just to flag that in 2023, SRS dealt with 63 doorstep crimes and 72 scam cases. 20 residents were identified through the year of having suffered a doorstep crime incident or having been on the receiving end of a scam, and redress to the tune of £40,300 was achieved for residents. And there are a number of case studies against each of these statistics, and I think that's important to flag, that the statistics in themselves show how much activity is being undertaken across the council, but you can see the individual circumstances of some of those cases that they're dealing with, both in terms of the positive and the negatives of those cases, which are shocking in a number of those incidents that you can read. Over the last year, training and awareness raising activities have been undertaken. 50 members of Age Cymru Hope Advocacy Service have been trained, and the team have been creating radio podcasts with Bro Radio. I know that there's been mentioned previously in reports of the Hairdressers Project, and as you can see, colleagues have been working with a number of hairdressers over that period of time, providing the scam packs and other warnings for clients of those establishments. Call blockers, I think, came up in an earlier report earlier in the year. And as you can see, since 2014, 67 call blockers protecting old and vulnerable people have been installed. And it's believed that some 47,500 calls have been blocked to date, with 77 scams prevented as a result of that activity. Turning then finally to young people, you can see that some of the activities that we know SRS do, some of the underage sales of alcohol, e-cigarettes. As you can see, we received 196 complaints in the year, and we attempted 60 attempts to make purchases in a number of those establishments from where we'd received those complaints. And as you can see, of those, 22% did result in a sale, which is really disappointing. But in those cases, they were investigated and enforcement action taken. And finally, licensing of taxi drivers. As you can see, in 2023, one case was referred back to licensing committee following conviction or alleged inappropriate behaviour. And again, I think that that's a reflection, and the reason it's included in the report is that we do know that is of concern, particularly due to those using taxis and other companies in using the late night, the late night economy. But I think it provides some reassurance that there is work that is ongoing throughout the year to ensure that people are safe when they're using the council's approved and licensed taxiing facilities. I think that's a flavour, as I say, of the areas that fall under this committee. But pleased to take any questions or, as I say, anything I can add that would be helpful for committee chair.
Thank you. Councillor Aviat, I see you have your hand up, followed by Councillor Hanks.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this comes under this report, but the safety of housing officers. I've had a massive increase in antisocial behaviour from our own tenants. The people are too frightened to call police. I've just had 2 other incidents now while I've been on this meeting. Massive rise, people bullying, aggression, heavy drug taking, Class A, and they're too frightened to call police. And I'm wondering if our housing officers, because they will be intimidated because these people are not to be messed with. So I'm wondering if they're going to have training, or do we send someone else in because they're too frightened to call police now. I'm doing it for them. And I'm just wondering if, we can safeguard our officers and basically safeguard our tenants. And these families got to be dealt with. I've got about 6 different families that I'm trying to deal with.
I think in terms of reassurance, like any complaint that we receive in relation to antisocial behaviour, we retain a anonymity in relation to the complainant and the complaint. Sometimes that is difficult, particularly depending on the circumstances of the antisocial behaviour. It may be fairly obvious if that were to happen. What I would suggest in those circumstances would be for residents to log that through ringing 101 in some circumstances if it's not an emergency and doesn't require an immediate police response, because that at least allows us to flag issues as they arise. That the staff within the community safety team analyse daily incidents that arise, whether that's via 999 or whether that's via 101. And obviously we will look at those issues and take a view as to whether we respond or not. The report itself doesn't indicate, I guess, in terms of the activity that is being undertaken in relation to ASB. What I can say is that there is a huge increase in ASB in the Vale of Morgan this year, as there was last year. And one of those reports that we looked at earlier around cost pressures, I have put forward a cost pressure for additional resources and capacity within the team to look at and to coordinate some of the ASB activity. In terms of referring on, if they are council tenants, then yes, they can refer directly to my staff. and my staff will deal with those incidents and those issues. We do liaise with the community safety team as well, depending on those circumstances. Staff are trained. We do have protocols and processes in place for ASB, and staff and residents should be reassured to refer. As I say, but in terms of referring back to your constituents, Councillor Avia, please reassure them that the information we receive is confidential. We do not disclose complainants' information. And I would suggest that if they have concerns, that they speak to one of the housing officers, the neighbourhood officers specifically, and we will take on board any concerns or issues that they wish to raise. Equally, should those cases that you specific cases that you've mentioned today, should you wish us to follow up on those, then please, forward those on to us, and Nick and I will deal with those.
Yeah, I am encouraging them to report, and that's the only way it's being dealt with, because I've really encouraged them to report. But could you ask? I'm in constant touch with Safer Vale as well, just to check that people have reported it. But the camera on Ramsey Road, I know you can't. I've just nagged them again, and that's one of my trouble spots, and it's just not working at all. And we really need that one. So could you push that for, back me up on that camera, please? Ramsey Road. It's by the home view, and that is one of my trouble spots, and it's just it hasn't been working.
I'm personally not aware of that, Councillor Avia, but I will find out, and I will come back to you directly.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hanks.
Thank you, Chair. Mike, I just wanted to say congratulations and well done to the Housing Department, and in particular the homeless team. There's just so much good work going on, and I just wanted to be recognised and say thank you.
Echoed my sentiments exactly, Councillor Hanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, it's an extremely busy time for our service area at the moment. A number of competing pressures, cost of living, changes in legislation, and as I say, just a reflection, I guess, in terms of how much and issues around poverty that we're dealing with, and lots of vulnerable people. So yes, thank you very much.
Numerous issues, aren't there?
I'll pass that on to the team.
Thank you.
Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Thanks, Chair. It was just in reference to the appendix with the performance indicators, and I just wanted to touch on the voids, Mike, and I know a tremendous amount of work has been going on with that, and I just wanted to ask, is one of the sort of issues then, or that makes compound things, the contractors or being able to source work, or is it still, I suppose that turnaround is because there's more challenges with regards to residents and their needs and their assessment of, I suppose, without stigmatizing or stereotyping individuals, it is the turnaround, and sorry if I'm not making myself clear, more to do with challenging residents rather than being able to get in and get the work actually done. Have I made myself, sorry, I've tried to link two issues with one around voids. Sorry.
Just to pick up on that, it is a mixture of all those things that you've raised, and we'll probably reflect on that a little bit later in one of the later reports. But yes, in answer to the question, it is a reflection of a number of issues, not just one.
Sorry, Mike, I've clearly jumped ahead of myself there with the report. Sorry, I'm one ahead of everyone.
Sorry, Vice Chair, that'll be on the ADP report.
Councillor Lloyd-Selby.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Clearly continuing to be a really busy and challenging time. But my question, I'm really interested just to see that section at the end of the report about core blockers. I wasn't aware that that was something that could be accessed through shared regulatory services. So I guess that raises, and I'm supporting a number of elderly folk, including neighbours who don't have any other support. And I guess I'm just wondering, how are we communicating that to residents who are potentially vulnerable and maybe at risk of those kind of nuisance calls and scam calls? And is there anything more that we can do as councillors in our local areas to raise awareness of some of the support that's available to people?
Yeah, I can remember, I'm not sure if members of the committee can remember a report a while back where I think a similar point was made around advertising the call blockers, and I believe it was Helen Picton, the head of SRS, that presented a report or reflected on that there were a limited number of call blockers available, and I think she did mention that it would that her officers were assessing the types of calls that were coming in, and then having to make judgments, I guess, in terms of where those call blockers would be allocated. And I think that was probably limiting a wider communication strategy, because I think her concern was that demand would far outstrip supply. She also mentioned, from memory, a number of services that the telephony companies operate, whereby call barring can be put in place on telephones. But what I will do, Councillor Lloyd Selby, is I'll ask Helen, if I may, if she can contact you specifically, and perhaps send a note via Mark that can go out to members of the committee in terms of what is the process. And I'll also ask in relation to the wider awareness of the work around scams and scam busting, and perhaps she can have a look at that and advise. I'd like to say I'm an expert on everything, but I'm afraid SRS isn't one.
I don't believe that, Mike. It seems to me that would be incredibly helpful. Totally take the point about limited resources and the need to prioritise. Given the increase in this area, I just think that there may be more that could be done, just in terms of raising awareness of the general range of support that's available to potentially vulnerable people, particularly older people, and that's something in terms of our connections with our local communities that we might be able to do more in terms of raising awareness of. So yeah, that would be great if you could take that. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we made the point earlier. Not everyone has access to social media. Not everyone has access, and of course, there's lots of tweets and what have you. I know that go out from the council in relation to a number of these activities. I know that Helen and some of the staff have been using podcasts as a different type of, I suppose, access methodology. And I know that they would have been acutely aware of older persons, particularly not accessing social media, and I'm sure she has a strategy for dealing with that. But as I say, let me have a chat with Helen, and we'll provide members with a better response than I've been able to give this evening.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Chair. Mike, I just wanted to go back to what you discussed about the consent required before things are reported to the Dark Project. And obviously, as we know, when we worked with a different police area, then we did have those reports. I just wondered if there's any movement at all, because we've been working in partnership with this particular police area for a while now, and I just wonder what we are missing in those reports getting sent to Dark, you know, where people could be offered support and things like that. Is there any positive noises coming from that, you know, sort of the police, that they are prepared to sort of, you know, move forward and to let the Dark Project know what is actually going on?
Yeah, just to reflect, it is a force-wide policy, so it's across South Wales Police Force area that they will not send through PPNs
without consent. We've provided lots of information, in fairness, to the police. We challenge, and we have challenged that protocol, and we've done that through the Community Safety Partnership, which Miles and I sit on together with senior level representatives of the police. What they have indicated is that they are prepared to take that messaging back to Force headquarters, and to reconsider their concerns relating to referring on without consent. I think there are some challenges, aren't there, if and I think I alluded to some of those around concerns from individuals about what does a referral look like, what does it mean, and what will happen. And I think if there is a concern that something that they perceive to be a response that they would perceive to be bad, for want of a better term, then there's likely and unlikely to be a consent. Now, our concern is, particularly if you think around the statistics around domestic violence referrals, that there can be many incidents of abuse and violence before a victim or a survivor will let you know, or have the courage to actually reflect on that. Our concern is that's too late, because that might have been a lower level risk to start off with that has escalated over 6 months, 9 months, and that behaviour hasn't been challenged. And as a result, when we do get involved, with the high risk case where there has been an incident that gets referred, that there are opportunities, it's missed opportunities, I think we're concerned about. And it's not about, and it's about how the police and we have spoken to the police about how do they put forward that messaging, that the referral in itself is just to ensure that we can provide the necessary support and services to the victim or survivor, as I say. And some of that may be around training. But as I say, what we need first of all is an indication that police officers, where they highlight issues, can refer without consent. It does happen, as you say, in other police force areas we're aware of, in Wales, in other parts of the UK. But we are challenging it. I can assure you we are challenging it at every opportunity. And as I say, we'll continue to do so. But in fairness, they have indicated that they are reviewing that protocol, and will advise us in due course of what that review looks like.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And I think what you say is correct. The earlier that we're sort of aware and can offer support, and that the person who's actually suffering from the domestic abuse knows what's out there, I know that they can know and not want to contact people, but if there is that initial contact, it might help them to actually come forward sooner, mightn't it?
Yes, indeed. And as I say, sometimes the police are attending and the abuser is in the same property still. Yes. So, why would consent be given? Yeah. So there's circumstances, and that's about also making sure that victims and survivors are aware of the opportunities and other avenues by which they can refer themselves for support if it's not appropriate at the time that a police officer is in your home.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or comments on that item? Okay. Again, another reference from Cabinet. Are committee happy for any comments made here tonight to be sent back to Cabinet? Yes, I'm just going to ask Mark if he can summarise any that have been made.
Right, so I want to check if there were any specific to Cabinet, or were they more just general to officers? I wasn't sure if there was anything specific to go back to Cabinet as such.
I don't think there were, but that's why I'm double checking with you.
No, if that's the case, obviously, for example, the query around the core blockers is something that obviously Mike and myself we can discuss with Helen Picton and our SRS. So that's more a lower level action. But if there isn't anything specific to go back to cabinet, if chair and the committee are happy to simply note the report.
Okay. Committee, are we happy to note the report?
Yes, Chair.
Happy to note.
Thank you. I'm definitely locking the cat out the room at my next meeting. Okay, thank you. So we've done 8 and 9. The next one is annual delivery plan monitoring report, Q1 performance 2023 and 24. Okay, if you'd like to go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take members to this one if you don't mind. So essentially, this is the first quarter monitoring performance plan. The document shows the information for the full council and also breaks it down for this committee. So it's early days, the first quarter of the year. So in terms of performance, I think it needs a bit more time to develop. So as I say, this represents the period 1st of April 2023 to 30th of June 2023. And when we spoke with the last agenda item that I took, it was about the annual delivery plan. Well, this is basically the first quarter of our measurement against the annual delivery plan. So in terms of the actions and measures with the remit of this committee, and you recall I mentioned before, actions that were in the annual delivery plan associated with this committee. Measures are performance indicators, also called measures. So in relation to the planned activities within the remit of this committee, 91%, that's 66 out of 73, were attributed to green status. 1%, one of them was amber, and the final 8%, 6, were attributed red. And of the 14 measures, which are the performance indicators, 64% were attributed to green performance status, 7 amber, and 29% 4 were attributed to red status. So the report seeks selected members' consideration of this performance and the proposed remedial actions to address areas of identified underperformance. And upon your consideration, then the matter will be referred back to Cabinet for their consideration. So, Chair, can I ask members to go to Appendix A, which is the one that looks like a bit of a presentation. So it's headed Annual Delivery Plan Monitoring Report 2023-24. So this is a snapshot for you.
Sorry, Miles, do you want me to put it on the screen?
Shall I, guys? I can probably see if I can share it myself.
If not, I can do it, Miles, if you want.
Yeah, the technology. Is that working for everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on, Miles.
Okay. So I've highlighted some of the areas. So the first section is what we've achieved under the objectives within the corporate plan. So I just highlighted a few for you. So several digital engagement projects are underway in sheltered housing complexes. Really important, obviously, to support older people to get online and improve their digital skills. Mike mentioned earlier, unfortunately, antisocial behaviour is on the rise. So this just shows you the volume. So that this is the community safety team. They had 626 incidents in the first quarter. Now, it's always a challenging quarter for us because it encompasses the summer, and we often have a correlation between incidents and warm weather. And 350 of them became antisocial behaviour referrals in the quarter. The draft Bail Tenants newsletter that was developed and produced which shares a range of views, including you said, and we did feedback session. I understand that's gone down really well with tenants. And tenant choices have been taken to residents board to select product lines for internal refurbishment as part of the new WHQS. Now, members remember we did that very, very early on in a session in the Memorial Hall before we started all the refurbishment of the council properties many years ago. Objective 2 under that heading. Clauses in new building contracts to create opportunities for apprentices. Again, this is important for us because if we're building houses, we also want to develop young people and to get rid of some of those barriers into employment. So we can do that by the way we engage our contractors through the process for development. Again, what we've achieved. So these are just some of the things for the first quarter. I've just highlighted the STAR survey, 76%, which is pretty good. So we're analysing the survey and we're looking to improve that, as you'd imagine we would always do. Objective 4 then, in terms of enhancing the environment and enjoying it. Really good performance in terms of private rented properties as a result of direct involvement from SRS in terms of CO2. That's quite a good issue. And the one above, a little bit behind in terms of our move to electric vehicles compared to some councils, but there have been some failures, unfortunately, with some of the electric vehicles, particularly in refuse collection vehicles, the compaction black bag type vehicles, and as the Vale is quite hilly, we need to make sure that we get these technology right for the vehicles we buy. So we've got 2 on order, 2 electric vehicles, and they're the Roma Quips that you see that take the recycling material. And we've also got some demonstrations coming in October of compaction vehicles. So we are looking to move the whole fleet over to alternative fuels within the next 10 to 15 years. It's a challenge, but that's what we're looking to do. And we're also working with Welsh Government on that. The performance snapshot I mentioned, this just shows the numbers I gave you. So those that are red and amber, those that are green, and I'll take you through the red ones at the end of this report. Areas that we identified for improvement, and my housing colleagues will help me with these, any questions you have on them. So the first one is really important to us. It's the Northgate housing software solution. So a little bit behind in phase 1, but nothing drastic. So we've shifted phase 2 so that they're not overlapping, and that's going to be starting this month. And of course, that hopefully provides better information to our tenants, and it makes accessibility a lot easier for them. Scrolling down again, areas of improvement. Move on to the next one, emerging areas. So objective 1, and I have to thank Mike and Nick and their team. So excellent support provided for Ukrainian refugees and those from other countries. I'm really excited about the Eagleswell development and to the Ukrainian families settling in that development. That should be really good for them, and hopefully really good for Atlantic Major as well. Objective 2, one of the things in Helen's area, she's been very instrumental in lobbying Welsh Government to create apprenticeship roles. So we previously were not able to use the apprenticeship levy for regulatory compliance officer apprenticeships, and through Helen's work with Welsh Government and with the colleges, that now can take place. So that's really positive for us. So we can grow our own in that area a little bit easier by taking them from school or college direct. Objective 3, ledger strategy will be updated shortly. We're working with Sport Wales on a regional development of sport delivery. This will mean that the funding will be regionalised, and we see some benefits in that for us. And that's been worked through now, and I would expect a report to be considered by this committee and cabinet towards the end of this calendar year on the structure for that arrangement. And when that is agreed, then we'll update our ledger strategy to fit with that work. And then objective 4, then just to say that we had an audit report a number of years ago in terms of our leisure strategy, and there was some negativity in terms of our role in the community for those that weren't necessarily using leisure centres at the time. So Park would have employed an officer specifically aimed at targeting that. So it's not for this committee, I guess, but other scrutiny committees will see this report, and as will cabinet as that progresses. So it's not all rosy in the garden, as you'd imagine. We've mentioned a few of the challenges. So emerging areas of concern, the revenue budget, particularly for frontline services, decreases year on year, and some of the changes we've had to make to either raise money or cut costs have hit the headlines, unfortunately, over recent times. So you'd be aware of the green waste charges and the 3 weekly black collections, just to name a few. There were also changes to allotment charges, and the challenges keep coming. So we're looking at innovation, we're looking at working better with the voluntary sector to try and ensure that we maintain our services to the public, but it certainly is not getting any easier. Supporting people in their homes, in their community. Infrastructure repairs are difficult for us, particularly our non-housing assets, so community centres and the like. We don't have a great deal of money, so that we need to invest more, and unfortunately we just can't afford to. So that's a challenge for us. A shortage of housing accommodation and temporary accommodation. You hear that, I think, every meeting that you have, and it's also a shortage of land, which is basically the problem. We'd like to build more, but we need the land to do it. We had the recent collapse of Jehu Builders at the Hayes Road site, and it's a very difficult market at the minute for builders, as it is for us that are engaging them, because of the movement in prices of material and labour. So that's not the first of companies, I guess, but we are working with them as best we can. But it's a very challenging time for construction companies as well. And then managing public expectation, which is what we mentioned earlier on with another report, Objective 4. I think we need to be honest and have honest conversations with our residents. I'm sure we do, but we need to have more of them more frequently, and make sure they're as wide as possible to explain what we can deliver, and why. And if they have other ideas about what we should deliver, that's fine. Let's have those ideas and let's respond to them. So, Chair, the next appendix then deals with those reds that I mentioned. So okay. I think one of these was picked up by Councillor Lovelock Edwards, which is the one in terms of voids, which features here. So I will obviously take some questions on that. Caxton House is the first one. A bit slower than we'd like to in terms of future development of that building, but it's as I say, it's only the first quarter. Okay, we're doing some work internally. That's an internal matter. The second one, sort of reprofiling our support services to try and reduce the cost of them, again to try and allow more money for frontline services rather than on our support arrangements. That's a matter that's ongoing. We've recently lost one of our accountants, Matthew Sewell, has left us, so that it's been a bit of a delay in that, but we will pick that one up as we go through the year. Review of affordable housing partnership. Again, we've had some movement on there, not as far as we'd like to be. Financial inclusion strategy, there's a commentary there about why we're not where we should be on that. Adaptation services cross-directorate review. Marcus has touched on the issue of DFGs, and we're meeting as officers shortly to see whether there's any synergies or learning from the fact that both Marcus's team deals with DFGs as we do in housing for public housing specific DFGs and support for less able tenants. And one day we'll get this off the agenda, Chair. This issue of Marcross Channel View. It's been really challenging. We thought we were there. Unfortunately, the tenderer pulled out, so we're having to re-tender. But I don't know when I'm going to retire, but I'll do this before I do. So I could be here a while, but I very much want to. We've been dealing with this project. The residents have been suffering long enough, so we are putting all our efforts into those projects in particular to try and resolve it to the satisfaction of the residents concerned.
Out of curiosity, I can't remember how long it has been on there.
Probably 20 years.
Oh crikey! Okay, yeah, definitely longer than I've been here.
Chair, it's ever since the right to buy, and if I'm honest, it should have been picked up better at that time, in terms of the arrangements for managing sewage. Yeah. And I think there was a lot going on at that time in terms of right to buy, and it was a push to sell properties, and it wasn't in my time. I don't think it was. Mike would have been working here as I was, but I don't think it was even in Mike's time.
Okay.
So, and then Chair, a couple of performance indicators. One has been referred to in terms of voids, and the other then disabled facility grant, which is a little bit over the days that we'd planned. And affordable housing units, we're below the figure that we want to be for that, and also slightly below the figure we need to be in terms of removing hazards from private sector properties. So I'll stop sharing, Chair, and go over to questions if that's okay.
Okay, no problem. I see Councillor Gwynjon has his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, Chair, that the Marcross cesspit issues go back to the days of the old Vale of Glamorgan Borough Council. Miles has had it for 20 years, but this goes back to the days of 1980s.
Oh, well, it was still South Glamorgan
when the
County
clerk
Council.
of St Donat's Community Council
Crikey.
used to come to me to, long before I was a councillor, used to come to me to do his letters for him. So it's a long, long time ago. Just I thought I'd just update you on that. Thank you.
Okay. Geez, I did not realise it was that long an issue.
Too long.
Yeah,
Too long,
we
Chair.
do need to get that
Too long.
sorted. We definitely do. Okay. Any other questions or comments? I don't see anybody else's hands up. Okay, sorry, I thought I saw somebody put a hand up then. Nope. Okay, so there are recommendations. We have 2 recommendations. The recommendations are that members consider Q1 performance results and progress towards achieving the annual delivery plan 23 to 24, commitments as aligned to our corporate plan wellbeing objectives within the remit of the committee. Committee happy to accept that?
Happy to accept, Chair.
Yes,
I was
Chair.
going to say I see 3 or 4 heads nodding and I hear 3 or 4 voices. Thank you.
Just to double check, Chair, that's the committee are happy to note then. Basically.
Yes.
Yeah. I know.
The second objective is that members consider the remedial actions to be taken to address areas of underperformance and to tackle the key challenges identified within the remit of the committee, with their views and recommendations referred thereafter to Cabinet for their consideration and approval. Everybody happy with that one?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah. We haven't really had any views or comments to be referred to Cabinet though, have we?
In that case, Chair, if
just
there
note.
aren't any, then if committee are happy to note it, unless there are any comments they want to go back
Okay.
to Cabinet.
Anybody?
Report, I think it's early days, isn't it?
It
So
is. It's always early
Q1.
days. Yeah. If things haven't changed much in Q2, then I'll be asking more questions.
So
Yeah.
in that case, Chair, are you in committee happy to note then recommendation 2?
Yes, Chair.
I'm happy. I see a few people nodding. Yes. Okay. Happy to note then. Okay. Thank you for that, Miles. Miles, Mike, everybody taking part tonight, thank you very much for your time. These reports have been quite informative. Please thank your respective teams. Thank you. So
Thank you, Chair.
sorry?
No, sorry.
I thought you were going to say something, Belinda.
No, sorry, Chair. I was thanking you.
Okay. I was just going to say agenda item 11, any items I have urgent, and item 12 is anything I have urgent under part 2. You'll be pleased to know I have no urgent items under part 1 or 2. So I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Wish you all a good evening and remind you that the next committee is scheduled for Wednesday, the 11th of October. Enjoy your evening. Okay.
Bye-bye.